Hello and welcome back to the Arete Outdoor Centre's Lockdown Learning, where today we're going to continue looking at outdoor shelter creation. You remember how in the last episode we looked at how you can create a shelter out of simple household items like your bed sheet or a tarpaulin ground sheet. Today we're going to look at how you can build the same lean-to shelter but only using natural materials like what we've got here. So the first thing you're going to need to do is identify a good place to build your shelter. For the lean-to shelter is what it says on the tin. The shelter leans on something. So we're going to need a tree or two trees which are Y-shaped, as in their branches spread apart at a certain point, not too high off the ground, where we can place what's called our spine. So we need to find this. And here we have our tree that we're going to use. As you can see, it's got a nice Y here and a nice Y split here. So that's our location. What we're going to then need is to get a spine of wood which is going to form the main frame of our shelter. So here I have 5 old pieces of fence. If you haven't got something like this, you can use trees which have fallen down of their own accord. However, you want to watch out that they're not resting on the ground and have become too rotten. Best is trees that have fallen down recently because they'll still be green and strong. Avoid, if you can, chopping down your own trees, as we want to minimise our environmental impact when we're doing this. So I've got my spine. Next bit, I need to go and place it in my tree. Now, as you can see there, that is our main frame. It's at a nice level angle. It's secure and sturdily placed within the 2 Ys branches of the tree, and it's the right height to not be way too high up where we wouldn't be able to put anything on it, but it's not too low down and where we're not going to be able to sleep underneath it. So the next thing we're going to need to do then is we're going to need to get some other beams, which is what I call the ribs. We've got the spine. Next we need the ribs to go from the ground up towards our spine to start to create what's going to look like a shelter. So what we've got here is we've got our 4 rib cages going from the ground up towards our spine. They're placed at roughly a 45-degree angle because this will give us enough space underneath the shelter to sleep. It'll also mean when we start to put stuff on top of them to give us a cover, it's not going to just fall off, and it's also at enough of an angle where it's not too flat that any rainwater that falls on it is going to be encouraged to slope off. What we need to do after this is we need to get 4 big stones, 1 for each of the ribs. We need to place it underneath, on top of, at the base of the planks to keep them in place. So now you can see what looks like a shelter starting to take form. We've got our nice strong spine going across our 2 trees. We've got our ribs going from the ground up to the spine, evenly placed and secured in their position with big heavy rocks. What we need now is to put some muscle on the rib cage. So for that we're going to need smaller bits of wood, and in any wood or forest you should find lots of these small branches fallen off on the ground lying around which you can use. If they're green, that's better for us because it means they'll be nice and bendy and we can use it to weave occasionally in and out of the ribs. When we're placing them on the ribs, we want to start from the base and work our way up so we can layer them on top of each other, and essentially what they'll do is they'll all start to rest on the bottom like this. So now you can really see our shelter starting to take form, and notice how by starting at the bottom and by using sticks that aren't perfectly straight, that are jagged and skewered in places, we've been able to use that to build them on top of each other all the way to the top. Now the final part is waterproofing our shelter. For this we need lots of leaves and old tree branches with lots of greenery on them. So in the UK we've got two types of trees. We've got deciduous trees and coniferous trees. Deciduous trees, stuff like oak, they lose their leaves in the winter. But coniferous, C standing for Christmas tree, they keep their leaves all year round, and they're what's called evergreens. Now these are preferable to us because when you take the branches and leaves off an evergreen tree, they're going to stay green for longer and before they die, which is going to give us shelter for more time. By turning the branch upside down when we place it to create a smooth surface which the water will run off. If the water can run quickly, like we saw yesterday on our bedsheet shelter, then it's not going to seep through and get us wet. It's going to run off onto the ground and leave us alone. So when we're placing this, we want it to be nice and thickly covered, and we want to start from the bottom, like with the mussels, and we want to layer them on top of each other. So, just like that, having now woven our evergreen branches and leaves into the frame of our shelter, into the ribs and the mussels, we now have a completely finished and fully waterproof and windproof lean-to shelter. This has been up now for just over 2 days, during which we've had quite heavy wind and rain, but as you can see on the inside, the ground nice and dry. So if you like the look of that, I'd encourage you to go out and have a go at maybe building one yourself. All you need to do is find a nice quiet patch of woodland or forest, hopefully one where you've got a decent amount of fallen down trunks that you can use for your spine and your ribs, and just have a go at making one. Follow those simple stages that we've outlined here. There's few better ways of connecting with nature, the environment, and with our childhood than going out and building a good old den. So I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Arete Centre's Lockdown Learning. Join us on the next one where we'll look at something completely different.